Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. I love Imam Hamiduddin Farahi. I'm going to start with that. He presented one of the most beautiful arguments that just moved me to tears. He wrote a book called Dalailun Nizam, Evidences for Coherence. Coherence meaning the order of the Quran. He wrote a commentary on the Quran based on his theory on how the Quran is organized. He was only able to write 9 surahs worth of commentary before he passed away. Okay. He predominantly wrote in Arabic. There are now to date 45 manuscripts of his that have been found. I met a Sudanese brother when I was in Malaysia that was actually doing a PhD on Farahi in Jordan, even though he's an Indian scholar. But he went to India and he collected as many manuscripts as he could, and he found some written in Persian. He actually wrote briefly in Hebrew also, and he's got 1 or 2 papers in English I did not even know about. But now there's a PhD paper being worked on. May Allah help him, complete that task. But I heard in my early studies of the Quran, I heard a lot about Hamiduddin Farahi, but I did not get exposed to any of his work. None of it was commonly published until I had the honor of meeting Dr. Akram Nadwi in Oxford. And when I met him for the first time, I asked him some really hard questions, and he just dropped these bombshell answers on me in his living room like it's nothing. And I was just floored by him. And he says, yeah, you haven't read this book? I was like, no, there's a book. And he handed me Ar-Ra'y Sahih fi Man Huwa Dhabih, which was a remarkable, just to give you an idea of the kind of man Hamiduddin Farahi was, rahimahullah. He wrote a book on who was actually to be slaughtered in the story of Abraham. In the story of Ibrahim, was it Ismail or Ishaq? Majority Muslims believe it's Ismail, and majority Jews and Christians basically believe it's who? Ishaq. And you would think, who cares? Actually, you should care, because the Christians and the Jews believe that it's Ishaq, and therefore the children of Ishaq were blessed because they were chosen for sacrifice, and the other lineage of Abraham was cursed. And since the children of Ishmael are cursed, Muhammad, they don't say sallallahu, we do, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is from the cursed lineage, therefore his religion has to be of the devil. And all of that goes back to what? Who was sacrificed to them. They built the entire mythology on that. Now, what he does, this incredible man, he writes a 3-part book. Part 1, the story of the sacrifice in the Hebrew Torah with the Hebrew citations and the linguistic analysis proving that it was Makkah and that it was Ismail from the Hebrew Bible, with an entire root analysis of every word that's there, and showing how you took Makkah and called it Sakka, and showing how you took he took him to sacrifice right by the temple of Solomon. Hold on, Solomon was many generations later. What you talking about? But you accidentally kept Sakka, which was full of black rock and a barren desert with a spring of water. Yeah, that doesn't sound like no Jerusalem, because that's lush. So he took because he was a master student of the Hebrew language. He did that in his first third of the book. Second third of the book, he collected scholars of the Jewish tradition and the Muslim tradition, showing that it was actually already held by huge numbers of them that it was in fact Ismail alayhi salam. And then he showed the evidence from the Quran. And it was in 3 parts, the correct position and who was to be slaughtered. He felt it was important enough. Anyway, so he wrote on the coherence of the Quran, and if you've heard me give khutbah, right before you fall asleep, when I do the Arabic portion of the khutbah, I often cite the Arabic that he praised Allah with in the opening of his book, Dalailun Nizam. And the reason I do that is because he would praise Allah in a way that is in accordance with the subject he's dealing with. Okay? So he said in that, I'm quoting bits and pieces of it, Alhamdulillah, which everybody should know, praise and gratitude belongs to Allah. As-sani' al-khalqi ala ahsani nizam. Ala akmali nizam wa ahsani qawam. He says, all praise and gratitude belongs to Allah, the one who crafts creation in the most perfect order. And then he says, وَأَحْسَنِ قَوَامٍ, in the most beautiful upright form. الْوَاضِعِ الْأَشْيَاءِ فِي أَجْدَرِ مَقَامٍ, the one who places things in the most appropriate of all places. And then he says, وَالصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَى الْمُؤَيَّدِ بِأَبْلَغِ كَلَامٍ, and I send prayers and I send salutations upon, we normally say, Rasulullah. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He says instead, Al-Mu'ayyadi bi ablaghi kalam. I send salutations upon the one who was aided with the most eloquent of all speech. Who was aided with the Quran, the most eloquent of all speech. Kabadrin tajalla min baynil ghamam. The speech and the Prophet that was so distinct like a full moon that appears from the middle of the clouds. Lihidayati kafatil anam. For the guidance of all manner of creation. وعلى آله وأصحابه الكرام, and I send prayers and salutations on his family and his noble companions إلى مدى الليالي والأيام, so long as the days and nights come to pass. وهذا الكتاب أفردناه على دلائل النظام, and this is a book that we dedicated to sequence in the Quran. But how did he praise Allah? My Allah who loves everything in order, in sequence. And the Prophet who's given the most eloquent of speech. I'm already giving you hints on how he's going to elaborate his spiritual argument. His spiritual argument was actually already captured in the way he praised Allah. Like he didn't have to go further. But I'm so in love with how he writes, I'm going to read this stuff to you guys. I want to read to you how he wrote. And I've taken snippets of it. The book is worth a read. It really is worth a read. Dala'ilun Nizam, for those of you that are Arabic students, it's beautiful Arabic. It really is. أما بدأ الهداية فتربية أخص صفات الإنسان وهو البيان. The beginnings of guidance have to do with how advanced human beings are and the special qualities that human beings have. Allah guides human beings differently than He guides cows and birds and bees and trees. Allah guides human beings differently. And the most salient feature of human beings receiving guidance is their ability to clearly communicate, al-bayan. The fact that we're able to communicate, because all of Allah's guidance comes to us by way of what? Communication, speech. فإن الإنسان لم يكمل صفاته العقلية والفؤادية إلا بعد أن صار ذا نطق مبين. The human being's capability to get guidance spiritually, emotionally, intellectually could never have happened if he wasn't capable of clear speech. فهذه البداية تسوق إلى تلك النهاية. So amazing. That beginning led to that end. And what's he talking about? Then he says, Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insan allamahu al-bayan. Check this out. Allah created Adam alayhi salam. That was the beginning. What did Allah say about Adam alayhi salam? وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. He taught Adam alayhi salam the names of things. Allah taught Adam language. Allamahu al-bayan. The Surah Ar-Rahman will say. That was the beginning of our story. That was the beginning of guidance. And what was the final guidance? Quran itself, which is al-bayan. هذا بيان للناس. علمه البيان. هذا بيان للناس. هذه البداية تسوق إلى تلك النهاية. What began with Adam alayhi salam reached its climax with the coming of the Quran. It's as though Allah gave us the gift of speech so that one day we could be worthy of the Quran. This is the first argument he's making. Then he says, let's talk a little bit about language itself, speech itself. الكلام لا يفهم إلا بعد معرفة تركيب أجزائه وتناسب بعضه ببعض. He says, speech can never be understood unless you recognize how its components have been organized and how parts of it correspond to other parts of it. وبالجملة محال أن تفهم كلاما من دون أن تعلم نسبة بعضها إلى بعض. It's absolutely impossible that you can understand what somebody is saying if one thing they say is disconnected with the next thing they say. If I told you 10 sentences and one of them is about the weather in Phoenix and the next one's about the stock market in New York and the next one's, it's like I'm switching radio stations, man. Nobody can understand what I'm talking about. I'm psychotic if I do that. There has to be a connection, otherwise speech is not considered logical, coherent, understandable, effective. It can't be, because you're all over the place. You know what, if you go to like a mental institution, and people are talking about all kinds of things, like the aliens are coming, man, nice shirt. Or like, you know, they'll do that, because they're jumping from thing to thing. It's not understandable what they're trying to get across. فإن أخذت كل جزء طويل على حدته غاب عنك بعض ما معانيه ثم إن قصرت عن فهم نسبة أجزاء هذا الجزء غاب عنك طرف آخر. And also, if you took one part of the speech, somebody was trying to get a point across, you heard the first minute and you didn't listen to the rest. Are you going to get the point he was saying? You might even miss out the point that they were trying to make in that first minute because they were coming to the punchline later on. Right? So he's saying even if you took some part of speech and not others of the same speech, you're going to be missing out. It's always going to cause you a loss in understanding. إِنَّكَ تَنْقُصُ مِنْ فَهْمِكَ شَيْئًا فَشَيْئًا. Something or the other will always be missing in your understanding if you're always looking at partial views. He's trying to get across that if that becomes your view of the Quran, you're going to look at these 3 ayat, in this surah of 112 ayat, or 110 ayat, you're just going to look at these 3 ayat, and you're going to look at them regardless of what's going on in the other 110, something's definitely going to be missing because Allah decided that should be one speech. I'm not saying you shouldn't look at one ayah. I am. But in my own, because I have my own Quran studies are so impacted by his work, I can no longer say I'm going to do an in-depth study of this ayah. I can't do it. Somebody says, could you look into this ayah for me? Like, it's going to take me a while. Why is it going to take you just one ayah? Why is it going to take you a while? Because I got to look into the whole surah and then figure out where is this ayah in that surah and what's it doing in respect to the rest of this surah. Then I'll go into the ayah. I can't go into the ayah by itself. Allah put it as part of a larger speech. If you and I don't do that with any other speech, can you take the speech of a speaker, the quote of an article, and take one sentence and say, I'm going to write an entire paper on that one sentence in that article? Is it possible that at the expense of the rest of the passages that followed or preceded, that there may be something missing in your understanding? Is that possible? Is it possible somebody could accuse you of taking this out of context? As a matter of fact, in our speech, let me give you a simple example. If I'm talking to you, I'm talking to my friend, I say, I'm going to kill you, man. Stop it. And then we keep on talking about whatever my favorite ice cream flavor is or something else. And somebody takes my one quote, I'm going to kill you, man. And now they're taking me to court because I threatened them to murder. What's missing? Context. When you take things out of context, you don't look at what came before and what came after, then there is something going to be missing in your understanding. You can look at the words, you can look at the dictionary, you can read the translation, you get what it says, but you're not going to get what it says because it was part of a speech. It's part of a larger, continuous speech. By the way, Quran, the name Quran is argued to be from 2 origins. We recited Quran, and another qira'ah of it is also Quran, without the hamza. And that comes from qarana, and qarana means to flow. The Quran has a flow. Okay? And that's why it's actually, one of the reasons it's called the Quran is because it flows. And when you're talking about flow, you cannot tell somebody's got flow by them dropping one line. It's when they drop line after line after line, then you can recognize what? Flow, okay? Anyhow, so he then argued that, because he was talking, he had Quran students, and this is in the late 1800s, he had Quran students and he was emphasizing to them, ponder the Quran, understand the structure of a surah, look at the surah holistically, really reflect on it, let me engage the book. And his fellow scholars were teaching fiqh, were teaching aqidah, were teaching hadith, they were teaching other noble Islamic sciences, and some of them were starting to get annoyed with him. And they started saying, why are you wasting students' time contemplating the order of ayat? They have usul al-fiqh to learn, man. They have important, practical things they have to teach people, keeping them busy with this, and they would criticize him and his students. So he decided to write a little blurb about his critics, his friends, but his critics. And I told you he doesn't pull punches, so I'm going to read some of that to you. من أضر ما يظنه المتغافل عن علم النظم. And one of the most harmful things that people that are just completely oblivious to this knowledge, this area of inquiry, of coherence and structure and order and a holistic view of the Quran, أنه مع أشكاله وصعوبته وكونه من مزلات الأقدام ليس من مهمات الدين. It's because it's so hard and it's so not obvious, and there's so many possible ways for you to slip up in trying to figure out what's going on in a surah. This can't possibly be one of the fundamental things to do in the religion. This can only be an extracurricular activity. فلا بد أن يعتنى بما هو أهم وأنفع. It's more important that we should concern ourselves with more important matters. Study aqidah, study fiqh, study what's fard, study what's halal, study what's haram. That's more important. Why are you getting busy studying, how is this ayah connected to that ayah? Ooh, who cares? That's what his critics say. من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. They quote the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The beauty of the Islam of a person is leaving alone what's not your concern. What is your concern? Alif Lam Mim connected to ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. What does it cost you if you didn't know that? It's no big deal. Leave it alone. فتتبع النكات اللطيفة في نظم الكلام واستنباط وجوه البلاغة فيه يكون من أشغال الفرصة. He says, looking for the coherence of the speech and analyzing the subtle beauty and eloquence and rhetoric and linguistic wow moments in the middle of those ayat. This is just extra activity. This is just waste of time. Why are you spending time on this? فَمَنْ جَعْلَ ذَلِكَ مِنْ مُهِمَّاتِ الْعُلُومِ. And whoever would dare consider that a fundamental exercise of the religion, of important knowledge and important sciences, وَحَثَّ الطَّلَبَ عَلَى التَّشْمِيرِ لَهُ, and then on top of that is encouraging students to involve themselves in this kind of inquiry, فَقَدْ مَنَعَهُمْ عَنِ الْوَاجِبِ. This kind of person is actually preventing them from doing the mandatory things in Islam. Taking them, deviating them. This is a form of deviation. وَقَلَّبَ الْأَمْرِ. He's changing the religion. وَأَخَلَّ بِنِظَامِ التَّعْلِيمِ. And he's corrupting the education system. We have an education system where we teach, Arabic, then we teach usul, then we're going to read this one tafsir, then we're going to read the books of hadith, and we have a system. You're destroying the system. Why are you messing it up? This is how things are supposed to be. So he says, وَقَدْ سَمِعْنَا هَذِهِ الشُّبْهَةِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَنْ اعْتَرَفَ بِوُجُودِ النِّظَامِ. And I've heard this kind of a criticism even from those who acknowledge, fine, the Quran is coherent, fine, the ayat are connected. So what? Why are you so concerned with this? Why is this a big deal? وَقَالَ إِنَّ الْقُرْآنِ إِنَّمَا نَزَلَ لِلْعَمَلِ بِهِ. They will say to me, Quran only came so you act on it. وَالْإِسْتِهْدَاءُ بِنُورِهِ. And it came so you can get guidance from its light. لا للاستغال باستنباط لطائفه ونكات بلاغته. It didn't come so you busy yourself trying to find these subtle connections and, ooh, look at that word and that word. And that's not why the Quran came. Why are you busying yourself with that? And he responds, لطائف القرآن ووجوه الإعجاز ليست مقصودة لذواتها ولا هي غاية ما تفوز به. The subtleties of the Quran and finding these miraculous coherence, observations, these are not the goal at all. This is not why I'm advocating that this is important. This is not how you will achieve success anyway. ولا هي غاية ما تفوز به. They're not the goal by which you will achieve success. بل ليست معرفة نظام الكلام وروابط معاني الآيات ما هي طلبتنا. I'm not even saying we should look for coherence in the speech or how the ayat and their meanings are connected to each other. I'm not even saying that's what we're seeking. That's not even what we're after. كل ذلك يأتيك غرضا. All of that comes to you as a consequence. Those observations are a byproduct of something far more important. What does he say that far more important is? إنما المقصود هو التدبر في معنى القرآن الذي سيق إليه بيانه. The ultimate goal is contemplating the meanings of the Quran itself, whose clarity can only be understood by its context. We're not looking for some fun intellectual exercise. We're looking for the actual quest to contemplate the words of Allah, which have deliberately been placed in a context. Okay. Then he says, إِنَّمَا هِيَ الْوَسِيلَةِ إِلَيْهِ. And that contemplation and looking at the book as a whole is the only way by which we can properly reflect on the Quran. فَهَلْ تَظُنُّ أَنَّكَ فِي غِنًى عَنْ ذَلِكَ. Do you really think you don't need that? You don't need to contemplate Allah's words? وَأَنْ لَيْسَ لَكَ حَاجَةٌ إِلَى مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ. And you don't have any need for what Allah revealed to you. مِنْ عُيُونِ الْحِكْمَةِ وَالنُّورِ وَالشِّفَاءِ. From the wellsprings of wisdom, light, and healing. He's saying this entire thing is, at the end of the day, not an intellectual but a spiritual exercise. It's tadabbur into the Quran. I want to extract light from this book. وَهَلْ تَرْتَضِي أَن تَجْعَلَ نَفْسَكَ مِمَّنْ يَظُنُّ أَنَّ كُتُبَ الْفِقْهِ قَدْ تَكَلَّفَتْ بِمَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ وَنَهَى. Are you from the kinds of people who think that the books of fiqh, and he's picking on fiqh, but I'm not, okay, chill out, okay? He's saying, are you from the kinds of people who think the books of fiqh have already extracted everything that needed to be extracted from Allah's book? So there's no reason for us, فَلَمْ تَبْقَ لَنَا حَاجَةٌ إِلَى الْقُرْآنِ. So now we don't need to contemplate Quran anymore, because everything practical has already been what? Extracted. So why do you need Quran now? It's just references, dalil for the fatwa. That's all it is now. You don't need anything else. وَأَلَيْسَ أَنَّ الظَّوَاهِرَ الْأَحْكَامِ. And by the way, when that happens, when the religion is reduced to the laws that have been extracted from the word of Allah, then you know what to do and what not to do. The only benefit of Quran left practically for the Muslim is what? I'm going to recite it for ajr. Is then part of the culture of the Muslims to contemplate the Quran? No, because it has no practical value. Practically, I need to know halal, haram. Practically, I need to know just what I believe and what I don't believe. The books of Aqidah have already extrapolated what I believe and what I don't believe. The books of fiqh have already extrapolated what I should do and what I shouldn't do. So I'm covered. Now the only purpose of Quran left is reference for those two things, evidence for those two things, or I'm going to recite it for ajr and that's it. What else is left? So then he asks the question, making his argument. He says, أَلَيْسَ أَنَّ الظَّوَاهِرَ الْأَحْكَامِ مَنُوطَةٌ بِالْعَقَائِدِ وَالنِّيَّاتِ. Isn't it true that the outwardly of all of our actions, prayer, hajj, zakat, eating halal, whatever, are directly tied to beliefs and intentions? Isn't it true that everything outwardly we do is tied to something inwardly? And then he says, وَهُمَا مَنُوطَتَانِ بِبَوَاطِنِ الْأَخْلَاقِ. And isn't it true that both of those things, our beliefs, our intentions, our worldview, and our observations of the outside are directly tied to our mannerisms, our character, our morals, our moral view? وَكَذَلِكَ صَلَاحُ الْأَفْرَادِ مَنُوطٌ بِصَلَاحِ الْجَمَاعَةِ. Isn't it true that when a person becomes reformed, that is the only way a society can become reformed? You may not see his argument yet, but you will. وَهُوَ بِأُصُولٍ خَفِيَّةٍ مِنَ الْحِكْمَةِ وَالتَّدْبِيرِ. And don't you realize that a person can never be reformed until they go to the very essence of wisdom? Nobody will become a better person by learning what's wajib and what's fard and what's makruh and what's haram. Nobody will become deeply connected to Allah by knowing which group was deviant and which way. How are you going to connect to the inner wisdom of our faith? What's the only wellspring for that? That will be the word of Allah. The inner change can only come from the word of Allah. وَكَذَلِكَ مَتَى كَانَ مَجْرَى الْأُمُورِ عَلَى السَّدَادِ كَمَا يَكُونُ مَجْرَى الطَّبِيعَةِ عَلى الصِّحَّةِ قَلَّ احْتِيَاجُنَا إِلَى أُصُولِ الْإِصْلَاحِ وَتَدْبِيرِ الْأَخْلَاقِ وَتَصْحِيحِ النِّيَّاتِ. He says, listen, if things were the way they're supposed to be, and everybody's doing well, and we are naturally good, spiritually healthy people, then we don't need to go back to the original source. We're fine. وَلَكِنْ, however, إِذَا غَلَبَ الْفَسَادِ. When corruption and mischief has dominated society, وَفَسَدَتِ الْعَقَائِدِ, and beliefs are all over the place, وَنَغَلَتِ الْقُلُوبِ, and the hearts are sleeping, وَتَبَدَّدَ مِنْ الْمِلَّةِ نِظَامُهَا, and the nation, the religion, its order, its harmony has already been depleted. وَزَاغَ مِنَ الشَّرِيعَةِ قَوَامُهَا, and the Sharia has lost its uprightness. People are quoting the Quran, quoting fatwa and quoting what's fard and wajib, or citing the text at each other, but the morality behind it is gone. وَاسْتَحْوَذَ سُلْطَانُ الْبِدْعِ, and the authorities, cultural authorities, economic authorities, political authorities are making up new things about the religion, and we're just following them. وَالْأَهْوَاء, and empty whims. اشْتَدَّ احْتِيَاجُنَا إِلَى الْحِكْمَةِ الْإِلَهِيَّةِ. Our need for divine wisdom becomes more and more intense. So you tell me, are we in times where we are in less need of contemplation of Quran or more need? وَمَعْرِفَةِ طَرِيقِ الشِّفَاءِ, and to discover the way by which we can heal. وَالْخُرُوجِ مِنْ فِتَنِ الشِّقَاقِ فِي الدِّينِ, and to find a way out of the trial, the tribulation of the religion being torn apart. One holds on to this, one holds on to that. One says this scholar, and if you don't follow this scholar, you're going to hell. One says this book, and if you don't hold on to this book, you're going to hell. Who's holding on to Quran? Who's bringing people together? وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Where did that go? The only way out of that is go back to the book. حِينَ الْتَبَسَ الطَّرِيقِ, when the road becomes confusing. وَأَعْجَبَ كُلُّ ذِي رَأْيٍ بِرَأْيِهِ, and everyone who has an opinion is really impressed with their own opinion. وَضَرَبَ الْجَهْلُ بُحْرَانَهُ, and ignorance has already caused great famine in society. وَرُفِضَ الْإِسْتِهْدَاءُ بِالْقُرْآنِ الْحَكِيمِ, and seeking guidance from the Quran is being outright refused. Don't do it. He was pretty harsh in other places. He was telling his alim friends, you're ulama, and you're telling your students not to contemplate Quran. He was really harsh on them. Extracting guidance from the Quran is being turned down. الَّذِي عَرَّفَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى بِالنُّورِ وَالشِّفَاءِ, the same Quran that Allah Himself defined as light and healing. وَعَشَوْا عَنِ الْحِكْمَةِ الَّتِي أَوْدَعَهَا اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, and they feel not in need of the wisdom that Allah Himself endowed the book with. كِتَابَهُ فَهَلْ يَطَّلِعُ عَلَيْهَا مَنْ يَمُرُّ بِهِ. This is really beautiful and painful. فَهَلْ يَطَّلِعُ عَلَيْهَا مَنْ يَمُرُّ بِهِ كَالرَّاكِبِ السَّرِيعِ. You really think that divine wisdom, Allah's wisdom, somebody will come upon it if they're passing by the Quran like a commuter who's in a hurry? كَالرَّاكِبِ السَّرِيعِ. You think you're going to just breeze through Quran and Allah's wisdom will dawn on you? أَوِ الرِّيحِ الْعَاصِفِ, or a wind that just passes by? This is good. This is the relationship you want with the Quran, and you're going to get wisdom out of it? وَلَوْلَا ذَلِكَ فَلِمَاذَا أَمَرَنَا اللَّهُ. And if that wasn't the case, if it wasn't the case that we had to stop and reflect and dive into the book, how come Allah commanded us? أَمَرَنَا اللَّهُ تَعَالَى بِالتَّدَبُّرِ فِي كِتَابِهِ وَالتَّفَكُّرِ فِي آيَاتِهِ. How come He commanded us to do tadabbur in the Quran and think deeply about His ayat? وَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ هُنَاكَ مَعَارِفْ مَكْنُونَةٌ فَبِمَا يُرْجَعُ التَّدَبُّرُ وَالتَّفَكُّرُ فِيهِ. And if there weren't things to discover, if everything was just on the surface, why do you have to contemplate? If something is immediately understandable at face value, then hey, by the way, class is at 6 p.m. Let me contemplate on that. If everything is obvious at face value, there's no reason for what? Contemplation, deep thinking. Why would Allah command you and me to contemplate deeply? And by the way, literally the word tadabbur. I'm distracting from him. I'm giving you my own spiritual insight onto this. I'm adding on to this. Tadabbur comes from the word dubur. Anyone know what dubur is? Back. Tadabbur is the exercise of finding out what is on the back of these words. What is behind them? This is the surface of the words. And behind them is a wisdom and a meaning and a guidance that applies to me. That opens up light inside of my heart. When I discover, and that does not come. Tafa'ul suggests you are exhausting yourself to find out what is behind these words. These words that Allah has said, there's a guidance behind them. They're opening a door to meaning, a healing, a counsel that I'm in need of. I'm going to dive into each word. I'm going to dive into each surah. When I share with you tomorrow the meanings of surah, you'll see very differently, inshallah. I gave you some things about surah. I told you one of its meanings is manzila, right? A floor, part of other floors. That's its relation to other surahs. But when you look at the word surah on its own, oh my God. Yes, what a surah means. And then what an ayah means. And why ayat and surah are connected to each other. So now he says this, and then now this so far is not his spiritual argument. So far I'll summarize. All he's saying is when you don't do this, you're going to be in a spiritual crisis. This is not the reason to do it. This is the cost of not doing it. Okay? Now this is his spiritual argument. أصلح النظر في جميع ما حولك وفوقك وتحتك من الكائنات. Why don't you take a good look at everything above you, everything around you, everything under you, of all things that Allah has made. All of existence. Just take a good, ponder everything else. Forget pondering Quran, ponder everything else. تجدها مركبات ومصنوعات للانتفاع والتمتع. You'll find two things. Things are organized. Things are compiled one on top of the other so that you can benefit from them and you can enjoy beauty in them. Look at a single leaf and find the symmetrical veins on its face. Look at a zoomed in picture on a single ice crystal. Just look at that. Look at the patterns inside of a flower. Look at what honeybees do when they make their combs. Just look at all of creation. Look, just ponder. Look, become a physicist and try to observe what's happening at subatomic levels. Become a biologist and understand the order and the symmetry and the beauty of the design of something like the heart. Or the way in which a baby is formed. Just ponder over this and look at everything around you and you will find remarkable method, symmetry, system, order. Down to our genetics and genetic code. If one piece of the code is moved over from the other, life is no longer there. Everything is in order and the order gives it life. وَتَجِدُ لِلتَّرْكِيبِ حَظًّا عَظِيمًا فِي مَنَافِعِهَا وَمَحَاسِنِهَا. He keeps saying two things. You'll find order has everything to do with two things. The way it produces benefit and the way it makes it beautiful. Benefit and beauty, benefit and beauty, benefit and beauty. Quran, by the way, when we get there, I'll break the surprise. Quran, by the way, there are two things that will soften your heart. Its benefit and its beauty. Because human beings are drawn to beautiful things. And when you see something beautiful, your heart softens. You see a beautiful baby, your heart softens. You see a beautiful mountain, your heart heart softens. It softens, sorry, it says soften, softens. And these two things, manafi' mahasin, this is the key to tadabbur. This is what softens the heart. Now, بل لو شئت قلت, and you could even go as far as to say, إن التركيب هو أصل ماهية كل شيء. You could even say that order, sequence, arrangement is the essence of the existence of all things around us. All things around us. Down to your fingertips. Every bone organized the way it is, otherwise it wouldn't be a finger. Down to the way my eyes are organized on my head. There's an arrangement that Allah put inside of our bodies. وَحَقِيقَةِ وُجُودِهِ. And this is the reality with which it exists. If you didn't have the same order, it wouldn't be the same thing anymore. فَكَّ عَنْكَ التَّرْكِيبِ يَنْقَلِبُ كَأَنَّهُ لَا شَيْءٍ. Get rid of the order, it's as though it's not even there. It's nothing now. وَلِذَلِكَ لَيْسَ الصُّنْعَ وَكَمَالُهَا إِلَّا فِي صِحَّةِ التَّرْكِيبِ. And that's why craftiness, craft, artistry, beauty, and its perfection can never exist without the existence of order. وَإِنَّمَا يُمْدَحُ الصَّانِعُ أَوْ يُعَابُ حَسَبَ إِتْقَانِ التَّرْكِيبِ. A maker, a designer, a manufacturer will only be praised in accordance with the perfection that they brought to sequence, order. It could be the colors they organized together. It could be the architectural marvel they put together. But it's always about order. أو ضعفه, or it could be they're criticized for the weakness of order and harmony and design. You give two kids a bunch of Legos and one makes a work of art and the other one makes a inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You know, you can tell who's got an artistic sense. You can tell immediately. وكذلك كل عمل وتدبير إنما ينجح أو يخسر من جهة تركيبية من جهة تركيبه. Everything you do is either a success or failure depending on how organized it was. If you had an organized plan for your work, if you had an organized plan for your business, if you had an organized plan for your study and you executed by organization, if you had discipline, that this time this, then this, then this, then this, if you followed a plan, if you followed an organization, you'll get there. If you don't follow a plan, you won't get there, whether it's sports or business or, economics or studies, whatever it is, unless you have order, you can't get there. That's true of anything. You want to get better, you want to get more fit, you got to discipline your diet, you got to discipline your body. You got to wake up at a certain time, go to sleep at a certain time. You want results, you want things to get more beautiful, more improved, order is always the prerequisite, always. He hasn't even made his argument yet. فَهَذَا أَصْلٌ رَاسِخٌ لَا يَخْفَى عَلَى أُولِي النُّهَى. This is a truth, a deep truth, that anyone who possesses true, like a thinking mind can never deny. At the heart of everything is order. Then, this is his argument. إِن تَبَيَّنَتْ لَكَ ذَلِكَ أو تِلْكَ. If all of this became clear to you, if what I've said so far makes sense to you, التفت إلى موضوع التركيب في الكلام. Why don't you turn your attention to the subject of order and harmony when it comes to speech itself? When it comes to speech. فإنه شيء مؤلف ركب بعضه ببعض. Speech is essentially something that is composed of one part put on top of another, put on top of another, put on top of another, in a certain order. وَلَمْ يَصِرْ ذَا مَعْنَى إِلَّا بَعْدَ تَرْكِيبِهِ. And it can't possibly have any meaning unless there's order to it. فَإِنَّمَا هِيَ الصُّورَةُ التَّرْكِيبِيَّةُ مَا دَلَّ عَلَى مَعْنَهُ. It's actually the picture painted by a certain order of words that tells you what the author is saying, what the speaker is saying. أَلَا تَرَى ذَلِكَ عَيَانًا فِي اللَّفْظَةِ الْوَاحِدَةِ. Have you not observed that inside of a single word? One word, made up of spellings. You mess up the order of the spelling of those words. Does it have meaning anymore? The gift of language, it depends entirely on the gift of order. The word for language that's used in the Quran, among the words, is bayan. Bayan comes from bana yabinu. Bana means to separate things. Separate things so that letter 1 is first, 2 is second, and if I don't separate my letters, you can't understand what I'm saying. If I didn't separate my discussion with you today with, I forgot what I started with, can you remind me? Historical argument and textual argument, now we are in. If I didn't organize it, you'd be all over the place. Organization is necessary for communication. The more organized, you attend somebody's speech, the more organized their speech was, like, man, I understood everything. And then you go somewhere and the speech is all over the place, and guess what you get out of it? Nothing. There are friends you have that have the attention span of a squirrel. When they talk to you about everything at once. It's like they have their foot on an escalator that's going up and the other foot on an escalator that's going down when they're speaking with you. And you literally have to say, just wait. Can we talk about one thing right now? Because as you're talking about one thing, they go to this is all over the place. The more unorganized a person's thoughts are, the more unintelligent we assume them to be. Part of the beauty of speech, part of the power of speech is how a point is made, how you get somebody to there. An effective comedian gets you there and then drops a punchline. If he messes up the order, gives the punchline, and the cow said, oh, what cow? What are you? You start with the punchline. You messed everything up. Order is everything. And so he says, about this one word, فإنما صارت كلمة ذات معنى بما وضعت حروفها على ترتيب خاص وكذلك الحال لتركيب الكلمات في الجملة. And that's how a single word wouldn't make sense without order. And words put together in a certain order, only then can they make a sentence. And if you mess the order up, Bob punched Joe. Everybody understood that? Let me mess up the order. Joe punched Bob. The wrong guy's going to jail now. You can't mess the order of the words. It'll change the meaning altogether, won't it? So he says if order is so important in all of human communication, and the more organized and eloquent a speaker is, and eloquence is only a function of how organized a speech is, how well put together a speech is, then how dare you say the speech of Allah does not have heavenly order? The one who ordered all things just kind of assumed that his book will be missing order? While he put the order on the tips of your fingers, he put the order of every cell in your body. He gave you the ability to order your PhD thesis, but his own thesis has no order. He gave the most remarkable authors in the world's history the mind to be able to produce their volumes of work in the order that they produced them. That's all the intellectual gifts of humanity that we've been able to produce are because of order, and yet the giver of the greatest of all speech would ignore order in his own speech? How can you accept that? This is his spiritual argument. This is what I wanted to leave you guys with today. The spiritual argument presented by Habibuddin Farai. How can you deny heavenly order in Allah's words? It's Allah's words. That would be the summarized version. Just say it in all caps. It's Allah's words. How are they not organized? Everything He does is with balance, is with harmony, is with order, is with purpose. Now, I'm going to give you a quick outline of what we're going to do, inshallah ta'ala. 3 items are done, 1 item is left, and that's the big giant item, which is what? Case studies. So here's how case studies are going to be organized. There are actually 12 discussions I have to have with you over the weekend, and they are broken up into, I think it's 4 major parts. So I'll just tell you the major parts. I won't bore you with all 12. I've bored you enough with other things. Let me just open that up. Okay, here we are. First, we're going to look at a few case studies of seemingly unrelated verses. So ayat were talking about something, and all of a sudden they're talking about something completely different. And you're like, what just happened? So we're going to look at a few cases of that. And we're going to discuss that. Because of course, if you're talking about Quran having heavenly order, the first criticism will be, what about this place? This has nothing to do with that. We'll totally change the subject. So we're going to see how those things are connected in a divine way. The second discussions we're going to have are going to be how passages in the Quran are organized. Groups of ayat together, how they come together to make a cohesive argument. The third, and then we're going to look at a bunch of case studies at the level of passage. Then we're going to look at the coherence of surahs, entire surahs, how they are organized. Because a surah is not organized like a chapter, which is why I don't like to call them chapters of the Quran. They're not like chapters. You know, some of them are just one sentence. Some surahs. And sometimes multiple ayat are just one sentence. So the organization of Quran in a literary sense is very different from any other book. So first was change of subject between ayat. The second was passages. The third is going to be surahs. The fourth is going to be a number of case studies of relationships between surahs, how surahs are tying to each other, and that's a long discussion because, and within these four there are subheadings, which I'm not boring you with right now, subcategories, because there's lots of things to talk about when we discuss the relationships between surahs. There's lots of things to talk about when we talk about the architecture of a single surah. There's lots of things to talk about when we're talking about the organization of a passage, or even when ayat are jumping from one subject to another subject spontaneously or apparently spontaneously, right? So this is the kind of discussion we're going to have. My recommendation for those of you that are committing for the rest of this study is that you have a translation of Quran with you, an easy to follow translation. I personally recommend the Abdul Halim because it's easy to follow along with. But whatever translation you have, if you have an app or something you want to follow along with, that would be okay too. Because I'm gonna refer to the Arabic, but you're gonna have to rely a lot on the English to understand the subject matter, inshallah ta'ala, to be able to get through this stuff. So I hope that this series is beneficial for you, and we come away appreciating the Quran in a new way by the end of this effort. Barakallahu li wa lakum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.